Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself standing at the foot of a towering medieval castle. Its stone walls looming like silent giants against a sky heavy with snow. The wind bites at your face, the ground crunches underfoot, and the air feels sharp enough to cut. It's the heart of winter in 13th century England, and inside those walls, people are fighting to survive without a single modern comfort. No radiators, no electric blankets, not even a proper thermostat. How did they do it? How did lords, ladies, servants, and soldiers endure months of bone-chilling cold in these stone fortresses? Welcome to Boring History, where we dig into the past and uncover stories that are anything but dull. Today, we're unraveling one of history's great mysteries: how people survived castle winters. And let me tell you, it's not just about huddling by a fire or piling on furs. The methods they used were clever, sometimes strange, and occasionally so mystical they'd make you rethink everything you know about the Middle Ages. Let's step inside and start with a secret hidden deep beneath the castle's foundations: the earth itself. You're descending a narrow staircase, your breath visible in the flickering torchlight, as you head into the castle's cellars. These aren't the grim dungeons of horror stories, though they're dark and damp enough to make you shiver. In winter, these underground chambers were a lifeline, and here's why. The earth has a hidden trick. A few meters below the surface, its temperature stays steady, hovering between 8 and 12 degrees Celsius, even when the world above is frozen solid. Modern science calls this geothermal heat, a faint pulse from the planet's core, but medieval builders didn't need fancy terms to know it worked. They designed their castles to tap into this warmth, whether they fully understood it or not. Those cellars, often carved into bedrock or insulated by layers of earth, weren't just for storing wine or grain, though they did that too. They were sanctuaries. On the coldest nights, when the wind screamed through the upper halls and even the thickest cloaks couldn't keep out the chill, people retreated here. Servants, soldiers, even the lord's family might huddle in these dim, earthy spaces, wrapped in furs, feeling the ground's faint warmth against their backs. It wasn't luxury, far from it. You'd be curled up on a straw mat, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone, but it was enough to keep frostbite at bay, to keep your breath from freezing in your lungs. The stone floors above these cellars would absorb this subtle heat, creating a faint underfloor heating effect in the rooms above. It wasn't enough to make you kick off your boots, but it could mean the difference between survival and surrender to the cold. Some castles, built over natural hot springs or geological faults where the earth's heat was stronger, took this even further. Clever builders carved shafts or tunnels to channel warm air upward, warming a lord's chamber or a chapel just enough to make life bearable. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The earth, the very foundation of the castle, was a silent partner in keeping its people alive. And those cellars weren't just for hiding from the cold. They kept supplies: wine, ale, salted meat, vegetables safe from freezing, ensuring the castle could withstand a siege or a long, hungry winter. It was a delicate balance, a dance between stone, earth, and human resilience. But surviving winter wasn't just about staying warm. It was about keeping the air breathable. Let's climb back up those stairs, back to the great hall, where the fire in the hearth is crackling, but the air feels heavy, almost suffocating. With dozens of people crammed together, cooking, breathing, sweating, the castle could turn into a damp, musty trap. Winter brought more than cold. It brought humidity, and that humidity was a silent killer. Mold could creep across walls, rock could seep into wooden beams, and diseases like pneumonia or tuberculosis could spread like wildfire. So, how did they keep the air fresh? The answer lies in the castle's hidden breathing system, ventilation shafts that were as ingenious as they were invisible. These weren't modern air ducts with humming fans. They were narrow channels carved through the massive stone walls, some opening low to the ground, others high on the towers or roofs, preventing it from becoming stagnant and deadly. You might curse the chilly breeze slipping through a crack in the wall, but that draft was saving your life. It stopped mold from turning the castle into a health hazard and kept the air fresh enough to breathe. With people, animals, kitchens, and open latrines all crammed together, the smells alone could be overwhelming, never mind the health risks. These ventilation shafts didn't just clear out bad air. They protected supplies, parchment, fabrics, food, from rotting in the damp. And they helped keep diseases at bay, which was critical when a single outbreak could wipe out half the garrison. Some of these shafts were disguised as architectural features, blending into the stonework so you'd never notice them unless you knew where to look. It's almost like the castle was alive, breathing through its walls, keeping its inhabitants alive in turn. And speaking of air, there was another way they used it, not just to breathe, but to fight disease in a way that feels almost like magic. Step into the castle's kitchen, where the air is thick with the scent of roasting meat and boiling stew. But there's another smell, sharp and herbal, like rosemary or pine. This isn't just about making the place smell nice, it's about survival. Medieval people burned fragrant herbs and resins in special bowls, creating clouds of scented smoke that drifted through the rooms. This wasn't just to cover up the stench of unwashed bodies or open latrines. It was a deliberate, almost ritualistic practice to keep disease at bay. They used plants like rosemary, known for its cleansing properties, or lavender, which soothed nerves and fought bacteria. Juniper berries and pine resin gave off smoke that was practically a natural disinfectant. In wealthier castles, you might even find exotic imports like frankincense or myrrh, smoldering in ornate burners. The idea came from a medieval belief in miasmas, bad air that supposedly caused disease. They thought burning these herbs purified the air, driving out invisible evils. And here's the wild part. They weren't entirely wrong. Modern science tells us that many of these plants have antimicrobial properties. The smoke could kill bacteria and fungi in the air and on surfaces, reducing the risk of infections in a damp, crowded castle. It even repelled fleas and lice, which carried deadly plagues. But it wasn't just about health. This smoke had a psychological effect, too. Imagine being stuck in a castle for months, surrounded by cold stone and flickering shadows. The scent of lavender or sage could lift your spirits, make you feel cleaner, safer, even hopeful. It was a small act of defiance against the winter's gloom, a way to bring the outside world, its forests and gardens, into the fortress. In a time when disease was a constant threat, that sense of control, however small, was everything. And speaking of control, let's talk about another challenge, water. In a frozen winter, getting fresh water was a nightmare. Rivers turned to ice, wells could freeze over, and melting snow took precious fuel. Yet, castles had a secret weapon, condensation traps. Picture yourself in a cellar, standing before a hidden well or cistern. These weren't connected to groundwater. They were designed to capture the moisture in the castle's air. With dozens of people breathing, cooking, and drying wet clothes, the air inside was humid, even in winter. When that warm, moist air hit the cold stone walls of a specially designed shaft, it condensed into droplets, trickling down to collect in a basin below. It was slow, drop by drop, but it was steady, producing clean, unfrozen water when the world outside was locked in ice. Some castles even had ducts to channel humid air from kitchens or stables into these cisterns, boosting the yield. It's the kind of thing that sounds simple until you realize they were doing this without modern tools or scientific knowledge. They were turning the castle's own breath into a lifeline, using nothing but stone, gravity, and an uncanny understanding of nature. This water wasn't just for drinking. It was for cooking, for animals, for keeping the castle alive through a siege or a long winter. It's another reminder that these people weren't just enduring their environment. They were mastering it. And mastery didn't stop with water. Let's step outside, into the dark, misty forests around the castle, where another kind of magic was waiting. It's pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows you whole. You're a guard, patrolling the castle's perimeter, or a hunter, lost after a long day. Then you see it. A faint, ghostly glow, like a spirit in the woods. This is foxfire, the eerie light from bioluminescent fungi growing on rotting wood. To a medieval person, it must have seemed like a miracle, but they didn't just marvel at it, they used it. That guard might follow the glow of a fallen log to find his way. That hunter could use it to avoid a fall. And inside the castle, small pieces of this glowing wood could be brought in as nightlights, safe for a child's cradle or a dark corridor where a candle was too risky. This light didn't give warmth, and it was too faint for reading or sewing, but it was a beacon in the darkness. In a world where candles were expensive and fires were dangerous, foxfire was a gift from nature, a way to push back the oppressive dark. It's easy to imagine a knight, weary from a long journey, spotting that faint glow through the fog and feeling a surge of hope. It wasn't just practical. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the bleakest moments, there was light to be found. And light wasn't just for navigation, it was for warmth, too. Let's head back inside, to the castle's halls, where they found another way to capture the sun's fleeting rays. You're in a gloomy hall, the weak winter sun barely filtering through narrow windows. But then, a servant places a polished metal plate, maybe tin, copper, or even silver, near a window, angled to catch the light. Suddenly, a beam of sunlight dances across the room, landing on a desk or a bed. These weren't just decorations. They were solar concentrators, focusing the sun's faint rays to create a pocket of warmth. It wasn't enough to heat the whole room, but it could raise the temperature in a small area by a few precious degrees, enough to thaw frozen fingers or make delicate work possible. It was like capturing a piece of the sun itself, a fleeting gift in a world of cold. In wealthier castles, window niches might be lined with polished stone or plaster to enhance this effect, scattering light deeper into the room and lifting the gloom. This wasn't just about warmth, it was about hope. Winter days in England are short, and the darkness could crush your spirit. Those beams of light made the castle feel less like a tomb, less like a prison. It's the kind of ingenuity that makes you marvel. These people, with no electricity or modern optics, turned metal and stone into tools for survival and sanity. And they didn't stop there. Let's move to the sleeping quarters, where even the beds were part of the fight against the cold. In the oldest castles, especially the massive keeps, beds weren't always freestanding. Picture a stone niche carved into the wall, just big enough for a person to curl up in. These weren't just for saving space, they were a survival tactic. Stone is cold, sure, but a small, enclosed niche traps your body heat, creating a microclimate a few degrees warmer than the open room. Add a thick layer of straw, furs, or wool, and you've got a cocoon that keeps you from freezing. Some niches even had curtains or wooden doors, sealing in the warmth. And the mattresses? They might be stuffed with grain husks or whole grains like oats, which could ferment slightly in the damp air, giving off a faint, steady heat. It's like sleeping on a living, breathing heater, a subtle but vital warmth that made the difference between shivering and sleeping. These niches were often near fireplaces or in the castle's inner sanctum, far from drafty windows. For the wealthy, they might be lined with precious furs, sheepskin, fox, even sable, turning a cold stone recess into a haven. It was like sleeping in a tiny cave, a private refuge from the winter's bite. And speaking of refuge, let's revisit those cellars, because they were more than just warm hideouts. They were the castle's lifeline. Deep underground, with walls a meter thick, the cellars kept wine, ale, and food at a steady temperature, safe from freezing. These fermented drinks weren't just for enjoyment. They were a critical source of calories and hydration when water was scarce. A frozen barrel of ale could burst, ruining precious supplies, but the cellar's stable warmth prevented that. These spaces were engineered with precision, carved into rock or insulated by earth, turning the castle's foundation into a giant thermos. They ensured the castle could withstand a siege or a long winter, keeping the garrison fed and hydrated. It wasn't just about survival, it was about endurance, about outlasting the cold and the enemy. And then there's the smallest details, like the keyhole in a door. Those massive oak doors, studded with iron, were far from airtight. Gaps and cracks let in drafts, and yes, they made you shiver. But they also saved lives. In a room with a roaring hearth, those tiny airflows kept the fire alive and prevented carbon monoxide from building up. That keyhole you cursed for letting in the cold? It was a silent guardian, ensuring you didn't suffocate in your sleep. It's a perfect example of how even the flaws in a castle's design were part of its survival system. So, there you have it, the saga of how medieval people turned stone fortresses into havens against the winter. From the earth's hidden warmth to the glow of fox fire, from scented smoke to leaky doors, every detail was a testament to their ingenuity and resilience. They didn't just survive, they thrived, finding ways to carve out comfort in a world of cold and dark. These weren't just technical tricks, they were acts of defiance, small victories against a merciless season. The castle wasn't just a building. It was a partner, a living system that worked with its people to keep them alive. And that's what makes this story so incredible. These people, with no modern technology, used their wits, their intuition, and their deep connection to the world around them to outsmart the winter. If this journey through the past has sparked your curiosity, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join us at Boring History for more stories that prove the past is anything but boring. And let us know in the comments, which of these medieval survival tricks blew your mind? Have you got a favorite castle or a winter survival story of your own? Drop it below, and let's keep the conversation going. The secrets of our ancestors are waiting. Let's uncover them together.